Hi guys. Okay, so we're going to work with inverse trig today, and we use inverse trigonometry just to find angles. We don't use inverse trigonometry for anything else. It is just used for angles. So what the heck is inverse trigonometry? Let me show you what it looks like. So it's sine to a negative 1 power. So that would be the inverse of sine is how we say that, or sine inverse is fine too. Okay, so that's how that's read. Now, what is a negative 1 exponent? So let's kind of go back to what we learned back in Algebra 1. So a negative 1 exponent, if to get rid of a negative, we'd have to move it down, right? So this would really be equivalent to 1 over x, right? So it's kind of like division of x is what the inverse is. So we use this when we're finding angles only. So if I had, let's say I had sine of theta. Theta is just a value that we don't know, so that's something that we're going to solve for, equals 4/7. If I wanted to find theta, or x, or whatever your variable is, we'd have to divide by sine. How is that possible? Sine is nothing without a value with it, correct? So I'd want to divide by sine, but we can't do that. Okay, so what we say is we're going to do sine inverse. So we're going to go sine theta equals 4/7, and then we're going to multiply both sides by sine inverse. Sine inverse does go in front, because if we were to write 4/7 times sine inverse, again, that means nothing because there has to be something here to the right of our trig function, okay? So sine inverse times sine goes away, so we're left with just theta on that guy. And then we would just put in our calculator sine inverse of 4/7, and we would get our theta value out. Okay, so let's look at a question. So this one, we don't have to draw the triangle or anything like that. We just have to, it gives us an equation and we need to solve that equation. So that's not too shabby. So let's look at that guy. So we're going to do, let's go over here. So we have sine of A equals 0.7314. We want to figure out what A is. We can't divide by sine, so what we're going to do is we're going to multiply both sides by sine inverse. Sine inverse. So sine inverse times sine goes away, because again, that's kind of like saying 1 over x times x. That's x over x, which is just 1. So sine inverse times sine is like saying 1 over sine times sine, which is sine over sine, which is 1. So that's why we can cancel those guys out, okay? So we get A equals sine inverse of 0.7314. On your calculator, if you look right above the sign, do you see that sign to the negative 1? That's the button we want. So it's blue, which means we have to push the blue button on the top left, and then sine, so we get sine inverse. And then what was the value we were plugging in? 0.7314. So that's our answer, and it wants us to round to the nearest hundredth. So that means we're going to look at the third number, which is a 3, which means we don't round. So that would be A is equal to 47.00, or better yet, 47 degrees, which is the acceptable answer because it says round to the nearest hundredth if necessary on Canvas for your questions that you're working on. All right, now let's look at this guy. Okay, so we have this lovely triangle this time, so they can kind of come in any way. Right here, I see an unknown angle, so you need to think inverse is what we're going to be using, okay? So let's figure out which ratio we need. I'm going to go ahead using this x angle and label everything with the h's and o's, okay? So opposite of your hypotenuse, there's your h. This guy would be the adjacent. So what trig ratio do we need? Which one has an AH? So some old hippie caught another hippie tripping on asphalt. So it looks like this guy. Okay, so we're going to do cos of some angle that we don't know equals the adjacent side over the hypotenuse side. We want to get x by itself, so we need to divide by cos, which isn't possible. So we're going to go cos inverse, cos inverse. Cos inverse times cos goes away, so we get x equals cosine inverse of 8/11. Come on over to our calculator. Second cosine 8/11. We get 43.34, and to the nearest, this one says to the nearest tenth this time. So we get x equals 43.34. Look at this number, that's less than 5, so we don't round. So x is 43.3 degrees. And we're done with that guy.